Going to give everybody the 2-minute warning. So if you want to go ahead and grab some coffee, we'll get started in a few minutes. All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with our last of the mini webinar series, the Winter Technical Briefs. As we've done in the past few here, we're going to get started with our presentation, and then I'll come back, talk a little bit about the SaltSmart Collaborative and some of the other resources available. We will have Daniel with us today from Henderson Products, talking about the fine art of brine making. As in the past, I have both the chat window and the Q&A open here on my screen. So if you have questions anywhere along the way, if you want to put those in there, we will have some time for some discussion at the end. I can turn people's mics on if they'd like to ask questions directly. Otherwise, I'll put the questions to Daniel, and we'll make sure we include his contact information so that if you have questions afterwards, you can always get in contact with him. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Dan and let him introduce himself. And he stopped sharing my screen. And Danny, you can go ahead and get yours shared.
I think I just hit the wrong one. Now all I have is a big picture. Do I? No, now I have control.
Yep.
How do I go back to my screen? Zoom presentation. Here we go. Sorry, I somehow messed that up, but
that's all right.
All right.
There you go.
There we
all
go.
set.
You see me okay? Okay.
Yep.
Welcome everyone. Excited to talk about brine with you here today. I will just give you just a real short background, just so you know where I'm coming from on this. I started in snow removal back in the early 90s, and about 1996, I started using liquids. And so I've got a history in this going back quite a ways. And the last 7 years, probably done 600 or 700 seminars around the country just on the power of brine and what brine will do for you. In my travels, one of the things I like to do before I get into the specifics is really, and since we're not face to face and it's not a 4 hour seminar, um, I don't have time to really get to know where you guys are as far as what you know, what you don't know, what you're interested in. So I'll try to kind of start rudimentary, but at the same time, I don't want to talk to you like you don't know anything. So please don't be offended if I am very simplistic like this first one. But I get a lot of questions about what is brine. And the definition at dictionary.com kind of left me wanting, but it says water saturated with or containing large amounts of salt, especially sodium chloride. And so today, when we talk about brine, basically I'm talking about salt brine, sodium chloride, though all the different chemicals can be brined, whether it's calcium, magnesium, or even now dealing with several non-chloride brines that is used in airports and things like that. But the primary one we're going to be talking about is salt brine, and we'll try to get into a certain depth with it. And then certainly, if you have questions, feel free to send those off, and I'll see if I can answer them. If I can't, I'll say I can't. So, welcome. Let's get started here. So our goal with snow removal basically is, as we see here, wet or slushy. But unfortunately, in our industry, we have been taught basically to be reactive with snow removal. And so we end up kind of down here in the hard pack and the ice. I mean, if we wait to do something until there's already snow, we will guaranteed have hard pack and we will have ice. And it takes a lot more, and we'll get into how much more uh, product to break up that hard pack and that ice. So our goal is to keep it wet and slushy. And we're having great success with that with brine. So I think there are three reasons to be using brine. If I go back here, kind of at the end of this slide, I should have had another slide in here, but I'll just talk about it real quickly before we go on. In my mind, there are three reasons to be using brine. Number one is safety. As you all know, if you've put this down at all before yourself, and I have a great story. I don't know if I have time to tell it, but the first time I put down salt, I put 6 tons on 1 acre because I didn't see it working. Didn't understand that salt takes time to turn to brine before it can work, because raw salt doesn't melt anything. It has to turn to brine to work. Therefore, when we put down straight brine, it works immediately. So you have immediate protection as much as you can get when you put brine down before a storm. So that's number one. Obviously, if it wasn't safe, none of the other things really matter when it comes to the roads. Second thing is the environmental issue, and that was the slide we're getting ready to show here. The impact of salt on our water systems has been very surprising to me. Coming up in this industry, this is something I wasn't aware of at all until I actually sold my company and started with a manufacturing company, and we started doing investigations and seeing what damage we were doing as an industry to our water. And so I think this is probably the biggest reason to change to brine. Unfortunately, it's not the reason that motivates a lot of people. Most people are not going to change to brine because of the environmental aspect. They're going to change because of the third reason, and that's because of how cost effective it is. You are putting down so much less salt, and so it's costing you so much less when you use brine, and it's super effective. There's only one downside to it that I can see, and that is that it doesn't have the longevity of a rock because you don't have as much sodium chloride in it. But that can be overcome, and there are ways to deal with that, including how do you put it down when your storms start as rain, freezing rain, all those things. There are a lot of people out there that have kind of overcome those issues, though I still hear questions on that a lot, and we can get into that if you all have questions about it. But so let's go to the second point here of the environmental aspect for just a second, and then we'll get more into the science and the art of it. 1 teaspoon pollutes 5 gallons of water. 10 yards pollutes 8 million gallons of water. So the last statistics I have down here was 2014, when we used 19 million tons of salt. So you can imagine how much water that's polluting. And then obviously we don't have a way to get that salt out of the water unless we put in like a desalinization plant, which is not by any means cost effective. They are doing some of that out on the coast, but it's definitely not cost effective. Excuse me, just a second. I've got a cough here. So you can see, I mean, New York State was where I became super familiar with this. And the thing that was interesting in this was it was our industry unquestionably that was causing the problems, because the roads that were not associated with the lake up there, or the rivers, the streams that were not associated with roads, had no contamination, and all the streams and rivers with the lake were contaminated that were adjacent to any roadway. And so they've done some really thorough studies up there. And so we are the industry. There's other things doing other things to the water, but we're the ones polluting the water with sodium chloride. So I know in some of the areas of the country here around the Great Lakes, especially, this has become a huge deal. So I'm going to suggest there are 5 different places you can use brine. Number 1 would be pre-treating your piles. So this would be putting brine on your piles. Now that would need to be a blended product, but primarily brine, 80% or so brine on your salt piles before they ever go out in your trucks. In my experience, I never ever used dry salt. I always used pre-treated piles. The second one is what we call DLA, direct liquid application, and this would be where you are spraying brine directly on the road, and it can be in before the storm, during the storm, or after the storm. And we have people all over the country doing all 3 things. So the third would be pre-wetting your salt. So in other words, you're throwing salt out of a spreader and you're putting liquid on it as it goes through the spreader and off the spinner. The fourth thing would be slurry. And slurry is I'm going to say a fairly new phenomenon. Slurry, salt will only hold approximately 10 gallons per ton of material, and sometimes less, depends on the salt. But slurry is going to increase that drastically, 30, 50 gallons per ton, so that it comes out, like it says, like a slurry, and it's incredibly effective. Because now you have the instantaneousness of the brine, and you have the longevity of having the rock in there as well. And then the last would be post-treatment, which would be, again, I consider post-treatment during the storm or after the storm. So while you're plowing or after you have plowed. So pre-treating is one of the things that most of us are familiar with. It's pretty much the place that everyone kind of starts when they start using brine. And so anti-icing is the most environmentally safe and cost-effective practice. It requires 1/4 the material and 1/10 of the overall cost of de-icing. And I hope to show you just a few pictures, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, to prove that case. And so as you can see in the picture there, where on the left-hand side here, we have pre-treated, you have bare pavement, wet pavement, but no ice. And on the right-hand side, you haven't pre-treated and you have hard pack and you have ice now. And it's very expensive to melt that ice and to get that ice up. It's also very hard on the equipment. And if you've ever been a driver where you're plowing against that stuff, it's a good way to beat yourself up really well too. So, all right. Now, the next couple slides I'm going to show are where there's a city outside of Detroit that had wanted to take this study, the Clear Roads study. If any of you've ever read any of the Clear Roads documents, it's a great study on snow removal, all aspects of it, but especially we love the liquid part of it. An awful lot of the facts and figures I've used in my presentations over the years have come from that, as well as my personal experience, but a lot of it from there, because personal experience is just that. It doesn't cover the whole gamut. So these guys in the Detroit area wanted to do some studying and take it further and see what does it do as post-treatment. So I think we pretty much all agree on the pre-treatment thing. It's being used all over the United States, and we just showed a picture of what it's doing. But post-treatment, that's a different story. There are some who have really been successful at it, and many, many, many who look at it very skeptically. I was just up in Jefferson County, Wisconsin. They don't do any pre-treatment. They only do post-treatment, and they're doing over 3 million gallons a year very successfully. And just side note, they're saving 65% of the costs of their services by doing that. So they've been super successful as a post-treatment. So here we have just a few pictures in the post-treatment realm. So on this one, you've got pavement temperatures of 16 degrees, a third of an inch of snow, light traffic, and light snow during the application. This is what it looks like 25 minutes later. This was without any pre-treating or any plowing. So you can see it was effective. Now, here's another one of the just huge things as far as I'm concerned in this is if you look at the amount of salt used and the cost to get this result. So this is a comparison of liquids. So they put down approximately 71 pounds of salt per lane mile. And here they're putting down, and I put this in acres, because I think I was showing this recently to someone who was doing parking lots instead of lane miles, but we tend to use the same, it's not a parking lots versus a square foot of parking lots versus square foot of a lane mile. Really doesn't seem to work that way. It seems like a lane mile and a parking lot per acre use about the same, even though the lane mile has 50% more square footage in it. So just to kind of explain that, I know some of the studies were originally done taking square footage, and we haven't found that to be quite correct, because on the roads, you get more traffic, you get more heat, you got some more things to help melt it. And so in a parking lot, we end up using more product per square foot. So you can where it says square foot or where it says acre there, it could be per lane mile or per acre, and they're going to be about the same. So you can see here at a 31 gallon per acre or per lane mile, you've got $2.48 in cost. 500 pounds per acre or lane mile at $70 a ton, you have $17.50 cost. Go to the next one here. This is one I really love to show because it's much colder pavement temperatures. It doesn't seem that much colder, but it's kind of hit that breaking point where salt itself is not as effective. So we got pavement temperatures here of 11 degrees. And you notice on the bottom picture, the shade across there, there's snow there. And in my in-person seminars, I always ask, why is that not melted? And everyone says shade. And that is true, but the truth really is it's deeper than that. It's pavement temperature, because if there was a culvert under the road right there, you would have the same problem. It's that the pavement is not as warm. Therefore, you don't get the melting effect that you get where the sun's hitting it. So we have issues. You take a road that's all shaded, you're going to have a harder time. And it doesn't matter if it's brine or anything else, you'll have a much harder time melting the salt, as you all know. And in the private sector, you get on the north side of a building and the sidewalks are much harder to do because it doesn't get sun. So the pavement temperatures are much colder than they are on the south side of a building. So you not only have the issue of cost here, you've got it's doing the job in a post-treatment world where the pavement temperature is 11 degrees. So here we can see a picture that's on the right-hand side, it's a grain of salt that has been coated. And on the left-hand side, it's one that has not. So we got dry versus pre-wet salt after 20 minutes at 5 degrees. So a lot of people will think, well, salt doesn't work at 5 degrees. But as we can see from this slide, salt does work at 5 degrees, and it works much faster when we coat it with liquid. So we'll get into the temperature aspect of it here in just a moment. Let's talk about the efficiencies of it real quick. Here's 10 tons of salt. The red is put down as a solid material at 300 pounds per lane mile. The blue is 10 tons of salt using 20 gallons per lane mile. So 10 tons of salt will take you in the liquid form will take you much, much farther than your granular product. Now, I will say 20 gallons per lane mile. I do know of people putting it down at 20 gallons per lane mile. I'd say it's more common to see it at 30 to 50 gallons per lane mile. But as you can see, that would still make a massive difference in how much ground you can cover with 10 tons of salt. So let's just talk quickly about the science and the art. And I always am talking about the two different aspects. A lot of people don't want to get into brine because they think they don't understand it. They don't know how it works. They can't figure it out, or they've tried it 15 years ago and it didn't work for them. And so they just say it doesn't work and they write it off at that. I'm going to suggest that there's science to it that absolutely for it to be science, it has to happen the same way every time, and it has to be observable. So it has to be repeatable and observable for you to be able to call it science. There is science in this, but there's also art. And I kind of like to boast here about my daughter, who is a ballet dancer and was accepted into a company down in Houston, Texas. And she didn't get there just by spending her evenings playing video games. She got there by dancing her little feet off every evening, practice until she got really, really good at her art. And I'm here to suggest that in putting down brine, or even a solid deicer, but brine specifically, you will not get really good at it until you've done it and done it and done it. And you're gonna get to know, just like you did when you put down salt and you started seeing it freeze up. Now, if you've been one who's put it down, you understand what it looks like when it's starting to freeze up. You kind of know what to look for. The same thing is going to be true with putting down the liquid. It's going to be different, but you're going to learn it by doing it. You are not going to learn it by listening to me or any other speaker talk about it. You may learn the science part of it, and you may get good feedback from different people who've put it down and what they think. That's actually a great way to shortcut the learning process, but you're really going to learn it by just getting out there and doing the art part. So I believe there are two primary factors that affect application rates and decisions every time we go out to put down brine. Now, when I say that, the companies that are becoming the most successful at brine, companies and cities and states, are the ones who no longer try to make a decision on whether to do it or not. When I was up in Jefferson County, Wisconsin recently. They were telling me that they do it every time. It doesn't matter what the forecast is, they just do it every time. And I've talked to plenty of contractors that have kind of gone this same direction. And you think, well, I'm wasting product if I put it down and it rains, which isn't the fact, but I can understand why it's a perceived fact. But anyway, there's, we can get a lot deeper into that. If you ever want to talk to me, we can go deeper into that. But the things you always have to consider, because of how heavy am I going to put it down and when am I going to put it down, are two things. Usually I like to ask the questions here and get your feedback, but since we're doing the seminar, we'll just talk about it. Pavement temperature. Pavement temperature is the first thing. So the studies pretty much indicate that guys have great success with brine down to brine by itself without anything added to it, down to 15 degrees. When I ask in my seminars how cold salt will work, most guys will say 15, 18, 20 degrees, somewhere in that range. That is the pavement temperature where salt is successful, from 15 degrees and above. Now, when you get below 15 degrees, we'll talk about doing some things different, although salt brine is still going to be a major part of what you would do there. So how do we know what the pavement temperature is? Well, a lot of guys who are running brine on a regular basis have these infrared thermometers they run on their trucks. You mount them on a mirror, or I think there are other places too, but and the driver can see what the pavement temperature is, and that can be recorded. That can go back into your dispatch center, because then you're going to know, am I being effective with what I'm doing or not? You're taking at least half of the equation and you're running it scientifically. So if you know the temperature, you know that it's going to work because of the temperature, and so you can measure that. The second thing is moisture. How much moisture are we dealing with here? Is it 1 inch of snow? Is it 10 inches of snow? Is it 1 inch of really dry, powdery snow? Or is it 1 inch of really wet, moist snow? All of those things make a difference. And so how can we know how diluted our product is once it's hitting the pavement? Once it's started working, which will be immediately, how can we know what the rate of dilution is? This is where the art comes in, because to my knowledge, there is not a way to know scientifically how diluted our product is. So you will only know that as you do this time after time after time and kind of see what it looks like as it's beginning to dilute, beginning to start freezing. You just don't want it to go there. So the main and primary thing is you want to keep this product working. One of the most important things with brine is that as soon as you move, and this is true again for every chemical we put down, as soon as you remove it from the surface, the roadway, your pavement temperature is going to begin to drop very quickly. Now, every chemical out there is affected by pavement temperature, and we'll look at that in a minute. So the key to making it effective is to get product down as quickly as you can once the snow is cleared off of here. So unlike throwing broadcast spreading salt behind a plow, because then you're throwing it however wide a path, with liquid, you can actually regulate that to cover just the path that you've plowed, and you're not wasting product. So you can put it down as you're plowing, and then you're going to have the most effective. So cold temperatures, I know some of the work I've done up in Alaska and Anchorage, they kept talking about permafrost and it gets too cold up there. Well, Anchorage, Alaska, average winter temperature in January is 17 degrees. So on the average, they can use straight brine even in Anchorage, Alaska. Now, in some places in Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, you're going to get colder than that on a regular basis, where you may need to run a blended product most of the time. But in most of the country, that's not going to be true. And certainly in the Illinois area, the majority of the time you can run straight brine, because the temperature might be 5 degrees outside. That doesn't mean the pavement temperature is 5 degrees. And so we're always talking about pavement temperature. We're not talking about air temperature here or ground temperature, by the way, even though both of those things do affect the temperature of the surface, they do not indicate the temperature of the surface. And the same thing with wind chill. One of the things I have found some confusion on is people thinking that water freezes based on wind chill. Water does not freeze based on wind chill. Water freezes based on real temperature. The wind chill, though, on the other hand, will affect how long that surface holds on to the heat. So you get a 40-mile-an-hour wind at 20 degrees, it will take your pavement temperature no time to drop down to that 20 degrees. And certainly I've seen that where we've gone from 45 degrees to 18, 19 degrees in about a half an hour's time because of a very strong wind. And we had horrible situation the day I'm thinking of. Fortunately, we were warned of it and we were able to pre-treat ahead of it and had no problems. But DOT in my city and the city as well, we had accidents everywhere because they weren't prepared for that. So wind chill does not affect water freezing, but it certainly does affect the heat being released from the surface. Interesting fact here, if you notice the top line there, at 30-degree pavement temperatures, one pound of salt melts 46 pounds of ice in 5 minutes. If you go down to 5 degrees, 1 pound of salt only melts 4 pounds of ice, and it's ineffective because it takes so long to do it. So we typically say at 15-degree pavement temperatures, you are below that, it's ineffective to run straight salt brine. You're going to want to put an additive with it. I usually suggest calcium chloride. I almost never suggest magnesium chloride. If you're with me on that, the biggest issues I've seen around the country, and certainly in my own experience, were when I put down magnesium chloride, and for whatever reason, the pavement temperatures came up instead of going down, and I had a worse condition than if I'd have had ice. It was very, very slick. Salt brine, on the other hand, doesn't produce those kind of conditions. You can put it down when it's 50 degrees outside, and it's not going to get slick on you. Like, I've not had any reports of it nor experience of it getting slick based on pavement temperatures. So you can pre-treat with it and not have to worry about making the road slick. Another reason is with your mag chloride, it draws so much moisture that the road surface will never dry out. It always stays damp, which is why we use magnesium and calcium for dust control. But for snow removal, sorry about that, I have those terrible pop-ups. For snow removal, we don't want it to draw moisture to the surface. So even though salt will draw moisture a little bit, it will actually dry out on the road, and it's not going to wear off. It's not going to go away. What salt brine does is it just sits there and waits for dilution, for moisture. And it can be, you can easily go 4, 5, even 6 and 7 days with an application of it and have no problem. Matter of fact, the most effective I have seen brine was in Ohio, where guys, before the season started, they would go out and put down 7 applications of pre-treatment at their regular pre-treating rate. So you don't want to put it down heavy because you don't want it running off. It absorbs down into the road, and then no matter if you have rain or whatever, they were getting enough there. And by the way, I kept thinking, well, that's going to kill the whole environmental aspect. But the truth is, you could put down 7 applications and still not have as much sodium chloride as 1 application of rock salt. So they put that down, and then even with rains, and most of their storms do start as rain, it didn't wash it away. They were able to take advantage of the surface having a pre-treatment down. And then of course they pre-treat every single storm. So just a thought there on the rain thing. But so you can kind of see how effective it is as the temperatures get colder. Notice on the right-hand side here, this is what I want to show you on this screen. At a 50% dilution rate, refreeze temperature. Okay, so calcium chloride works to 60 below zero, but at 50% dilution, it freezes at 10 degrees. Magnesium chloride works down to 38 below zero, but at 50% dilution, it freezes at 15 degrees. Sodium chloride works down to, wait for it, -6. So at 50% dilution, it freezes at 18 degrees. So when I have guys, and I've had this a couple times, even in the last year, that said, wow, we don't like that stuff. We put it next to our mag chloride and the road froze and the mag didn't. And we get sediment in our tanks. And so I immediately know what's wrong is sodium chloride needs to be right at 23.3% dilution rate. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but that is the perfect number. So 23.3% diluted brine will freeze at -6 degrees, just like rock salt. So you've got a pretty good window there from -6 to 15 degrees that it needs a little bit of help. But as you notice there, at 18 degrees, if it's 50% diluted, it's going to freeze up on you. I don't ever see it freezing up if it's made right. But if you have that concern, then mix 10% calcium with it and you've overcome that issue for the most part. That's going to take you down to 0 degrees or so of pavement temperature. Now, in some places, you'll get below that pavement temperatures where you may need to run a 20% calcium. But I don't think in the Chicago area, you probably will. In upper Wisconsin, North Dakota, upper Montana, places like that, you will. But most places you're going to be able to run straight brine. I think I would suggest that, and I looked at these temperatures, I don't remember them. I think you guys about 90 or 90+% of the time can run straight brine. So real quickly, anti-icing or pre-treatment, 18 to 35 gallons would be my suggestion based on clear roads. I've seen it used as high as 110. For post-treatment, 20 to 60 gallons. I've seen it used as high as 220 gallons. This will be my last slide here. And then if you have questions, I'll answer those. Anti-icing pre-treating at 25 gallons per lane mile, you can get 35 lane miles out of 1 ton of salt. Anti-icing post-treatment at 60, 14.5 miles. De-icing with pre-wet or pre-treated salt, you get 8 lane miles. De-icing with pre-treated or pre-wet salt, you get about 6. And then what most people have been doing is using dry salt, and you're going to get maybe anywhere from 2 to 5 lane miles out of dry salt. So that I can go lots farther. I won't go any farther. I'm sorry, I did have one more slide I'll show you here. So you're going to save $9.05 up to 207 pounds of salt per lane mile per application. So guys will tell me I can't afford to buy this equipment. And I'm going to tell you that you cannot afford not to buy this equipment. On an ROI calculator that I've built, I've not put anybody into it using their real numbers that they could not pay for everything they needed to get into brine within 1 year. Now, obviously, if you go to Texas, that's going to be a little bit different, but I just was doing it for someone in Minnesota, and within 1 storm, they actually paid for everything. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm not sure if I know how to get back. I'll put stop share and let you take back over. All right.
All right, there we go. I'm back. All right, so if anybody has any questions for Dan, if we can go ahead and put them into either the chat or the Q&A, and I'd be happy to throw those back to him, or if you would like to, if you raise your hand, I can turn on your mic and you can ask a questions, interact directly with Dan.
It was a very quick run through. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, there's a lot of material covered, and I know when we've had our de-icing workshops, I think I would say at least the last 2 years, Connie has been talking about the DLA, the direct liquid application, and maybe it was that county that you visited up in Wisconsin. I know there was a county or even a particular township that they were working with directly, that had been working on the DLA. And I know they were getting some really, really great results with it, even though it at first doesn't quite seem intuitive.
Right.
We
people
will
say, how can I
the whole
put water down on the road and have it melt snow and ice? But it does. So
Right.
You started to say something, sorry.
Let's see here. No, you're fine. I'm just trying to read through some things, and we will have a copy of the presentation posted hopefully in the next day or two up on the SaltSmart website. We'll have the whole thing recorded and posted up where you registered. Yeah, we're definitely, as we're trying to keep, as the title says, winter technical briefs, trying to keep these somewhat short. And I know we got through some of those last slides, had a lot of numbers on them fairly quickly, but these will be available to everybody. Let's see. Oh, I had one other question. So when, is there any difference in the equipment? Like, so if you're doing the anti-icing, I would assume that's the same equipment you got going forward to do your DLA. There's really no difference there other than the setting your rates.
That's a good question. Actually, anti-icing, if you're using a tanker, it would be a DLA, direct spray liquid application. So basically you have your tanker with your spray bars, which does the DLA, and you can do that before, during, or after. And then you have your pre-wet systems where you have like a V-box spreader or some kind of a spreader, and it sprays the liquid on the salt. So those would be the two different types of equipment that you would use.
But if you're doing the like anti-icing ahead of a storm, that's going to be the same equipment that you're using.
That'd be the same as the DLA. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Great. Right. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. I'd like to thank Dan for his presentation. Like I said, we will have this available hopefully within the next day or two, posted to the website, along with the remaining workshops, or the previous workshops that we had, the 3 previous ones that we had. And I know the 3 are already up there. So on that page at saltsmart.org, where you would have registered for this workshop, the recordings are there. And then we will have this recording up rather soon. Just wanted to go over some of the other resources that we have up available on the website for really anybody to use. We have some specific things for like public works, some different technical briefs and things that we have found, trying to curate materials and post those up there. If you come across articles or some of the other presentations or things that you think would be useful, we'd love to post things up there, give credit to folks and share that information. But then we also have a lot of outreach materials to share with your residents or your community. So we have some social media posts, we have blog posts, we have some different posters and bookmarks and cups and things. So there's a whole series of things that if you go to saltsmart.org and under info, and you can pick public works, and I think if you scroll all the way down, all of these resources are available to pretty much any organization that comes along. One of the other things that we do have available, or will have available very soon, we've been working on a calibration video for walk behind spreaders as we kind of were out there searching for that information. Really couldn't find it anywhere. How to do it for fertilizer, but not for salt. So we're just doing some final editing on that video. I do have, okay, a couple questions that popped up here. So Dan, while we still got you here,
Sure.
if using brine and calcium chloride, what would be a good ratio to use?
For the most part, I would suggest 90% brine, 10% calcium if temperatures were requiring you to go below 15 degrees. Now, if you start getting pavement temperatures down around 0, I would increase the calcium by another 10% probably and go to 80-20.
Okay. Good starting point. And then I saw so Rob Florio from Henderson Products is our local contact here, and he put his information into the Q&A. I'll also include that in the video as Rob is kind of our local rep here as far as looking at different types of equipment. And then the only other question that came up, is there a smaller version of equipment for home use?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
There, to my knowledge, about the only way to do it for home use is a pump up sprayer. And every once in a while, I'll run into someone that's making it and putting it in gallon jugs and selling it at, like these quick stop gas stations or something like that. But I don't know of anything nationally. There is a product. Oh man, I'm trying to think of the name of it. Really good product. It's on Amazon, I know. That will actually, you could spray it on top of the snow and it'll melt it. It's super expensive. I think it's called I want to say front door. That's not right, but it's something like that. But as a whole, it's pretty tough to find this stuff, the liquids, to be able to use at home. You might be able to find a contractor, and I know there are some in your city there that make brine that would be willing to sell you 5 gallons of it, and then you just put it in a pump up sprayer.
Let's see. Yeah, and I have, I guess more of a contact from Chris. He put in here for truck equipment or brine making machines, please contact. So Chris, do you want folks to contact? There we go. There's Chris's contact information. So again, our local contacts here in the region. So I will try and include the contacts, these local contacts for our Henderson folks, along with the video when we post it. All right. I think that is all we have here this morning. So I want to thank Rob and his local counterparts here in the region for participating in our mini webinar series. We got some great feedback doing this 4-week series. And if we happen to come across some other topics of interest to folks, we may have a couple pop-up ones throughout the winter as we go along, but would like to thank everybody. If you have any comments or questions, or if you have topic suggestions, we're always interested in that and tracking down speakers to help fulfill that. Like I said, we're more than happy to do more of these throughout the winter if we get some suggestions from folks. But we'd like to thank everybody for participating. We're going to go ahead and close down. Enjoy the sunny day and good luck this winter. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.